All right, so today we're doing an introduction to Simon Salik Bays 92. Excuse me, Sifim 5 through 9. So first of all, thank you for rescheduling with me. And for the Chazara Lamaisa class, I think we're going to do it on Friday morning, just to space it out between now and usually we end up doing it on Wednesday nights. Thursday night I have another class, so we'll do it on Friday morning, B'ez Hashem. The week after that begins Chazara, 3 weeks. So I think what I'm going to do, I mentioned this before, I think what I'm going to do is keep the same schedule Shurim, Sunday and Wednesday, and just read inside, go through the whole Kuf Aleph, the whole Tzadik Beis, and read and explain, and discuss as need be. Okay, so the next half of the second half of Tzadik Beis is really two sugyas, two different but related subjects. The first is whether we say ChaNaN with respect to absorbed food, question one. And then question two is going to be the question of steam. Yeah, so let's explain. In the previous sifim, we learned the din of ChaNaN. ChaNaN, ches nun nun, stands for chati chanas nevela. The piece itself becomes the object of the prohibition, not just an absorbed prohibition. And we explained at great length that the primary idea of ChaNaN is with respect to milk and meat, because milk and meat are not inherently unkosher. They're both kosher. It's in their combination that they become not kosher. And therefore, when a little bit of milk falls on meat and it's not 60 times the ratio, the entire meat now becomes prohibited, not just. That's right. Chaticha, the piece of meat, nasa becomes nevela, a non-kosher piece of meat. And so if that piece of meat were to fall into something else, you need 60 times the ratio of the whole meat, not just against the milk that's in it. That's the principle of ChaNaN. And we had the Ramah, which is of the view that ChaNaN applies to Shari Sudim, to other prohibitions as well. So if a piece of meat absorbed non-kosher fat, the whole piece of meat becomes ChaNaN, the Ramah's view. Okay, and the question becomes, when a little bit of milk falls onto on the outside of a hot meat pot. A pot of meat is boiling on the simmering on the stove. On the pot. And a piece of meat, drop of milk falls on the outside of that pot. A little bit of milk falls on the outside of that pot. So where does that milk go? And what happens to that which it interacts with? Or what is it interacting with at all when it lands on the outside of the pot? It's a hot pot, so it's definitely absorbing something. But where does that absorption go?
There's a level of how hot it is.
It's boiling hot. It's clear to show. It's on the flame. It's on the flame. There's a stew simmering.
It's on the outside?
On the outside. Milk drops falls on the outside of the pot. Right? Now, so where is that milk going? Into where? And what meat would I have to measure against it to turn it 60 times, to have a ratio of 60? And what, if not, is there any meat that would become ChaNaN? So the question becomes like this. There are actually 3 opinions, and we'll go through each opinion one by one. The last opinion being how we rule in the Shulchan Aruch. Actually, 4 opinions. Opinion 1 says like this. The milk goes into the pot. Now, this pot, it's not a first-time use, this pot. This pot was fleishik before. The Ramah is going to make that point. This pot is fleishik before. So this pot already has meat absorbed in it. Right? Now the milk gets absorbed into the pot as well. So now there's meat and milk mixed in that pot.
Mm-hmm. Where is the milk go through?
Because it's absorbed in the heat of the pot, right? On the outside. Now that pot already has, literally the middle of the pot already has meat in it because it's not a new pot. It's been used before. It's fleishik. Now, the milk and meat, before the milk even makes it into the stew that's inside your pot, It's interacting with the meat that's been absorbed in the actual pot itself. So opinion one says, as long as there's that Batal B'Shishim there already, and that's the beginning of the story. And even if it's not, it isn't becoming ChaNaN. It's not as if the meat that has been absorbed in the pot now becomes ChaNaN. Oh, that's the opinion. There's no chaticha. There's no piece that would then turn into ChaNaN. There's no chaticha to become ChaNaN. That's the opinion one. And if that's the case, all you need is 60 times the ratio in your stew, and you're good. And your stew is fine, even though it's milk that fell on the outside of your pot. In other words, treat it just like you would if it fell to the pot itself. Yeah, because you don't say ChaNaN on that stuff. Mm-hmm. If it fell in the pot itself, you have the question: did it fall on the meat protruding outside the stew, or is it meat on the inside the stew, or completely outside the stew? All the rest of that. Here, none of that applies. As long as you have 60 to the ratio of the milk, everything is fine. That's opinion A. Clear? However, there's opinion B, based on a Gemara, based on a certain Gemara, which concludes that there is ChaNaN by balua. There is ChaNaN in the meat that has been absorbed in that pot. So when the milk interacts with the meat that's inside the pot, the meat inside the pot becomes ChaNaN. So now, what do you need 60 against?
That meat.
Not just against the milk. You need 60 against, because the pot itself is not a new pot, it's fleshik, so it has meat flavor absorbed.
Yeah.
So you have two flavors mixing. The flavor of milk that was just now absorbed in the pot being mixed with the flavor of meat that was previously absorbed in the pot.
How does that form?
That's this view. This view is that the mixture itself, the whole entire mixture becomes prohibited, right? So the entire mixture now becomes one prohibited thing. So the entirety of the flavor that's been absorbed in the pot is now ChaNaN. And this view is the view. This is the view of the Smag. Says now it's impossible that the stew inside has 60 times the amount of flavor that's absorbed in the pot in the pot itself, and therefore the whole thing's prohibited. It's a very strict view, which is a little bit of milk falls on the outside of a boiling pot. Everything inside the pot is safe, because there's no way you can get 60 times the ratio of the pot itself. Clear?
Inside the pot and there's nothing inside.
Yeah.
So if it falls inside the pot,
yeah,
right? Like and there's nothing in the pot.
You're just heating up the pot.
Oh, it'd be same principle.
Yeah.
Same principle. Same principle.
That's,
The point is, it fell directly into the point is, its only interaction with meat is not the meat itself, but the flavor of meat that's been absorbed in the pot.
yeah.
And then this view says all of that flavor becomes ChaNaN, and therefore everything into the pot becomes prohibited. If there's a boiling stew right now, and the pot has to go through Hagala, the pot has to go through Hagala, go through koshering. View one, very extreme view. View number two, these first two views are not going to come up in the Shulchan Aruch. I'm just saying them because it gives the background to help us understand what the Shulchan Aruch is saying when we get there. Be easier to understand. View number two is like this. Now, you actually says this is the Maharan now speaking. It is possible for the food in the pot to nullify that ChaNaN. How so? He says like this. I'm not super convinced that the milk goes on the outside of the pot. It spreads throughout the entirety of the pot. Maybe it spreads a little bit. Maybe it says more. Depends how much milk you had. Depends how hot it is. When milk falls on the outside, it's not as if it interacts with all the flavor that's absorbed in the entirety of the pot. It's not true. It only interacts with some part of it. So I don't know how much that is. So how would I nullify it? Go to the max extreme case. As long as I have 60 times 60 of that drop of milk, I'm good to go.
60?
Yeah.
Oh, because like the whole pot every second.
Because if the milk spread in less than 60 inside the pot, then it's already nullified in the pot before it even gets to the stew. And if let's say it reached almost 60 of the flavor inside the pot, and all of, let's say, 59 measures is ChaNaN, but I have 60 times 60, so I'm fine. So as long as I have 60 times 60 of that milk, I'm good to go. If the meat, how much does the milk spread within the pot? How much does it spread? We're gonna just call it units. Ounces is not really gonna work here. Units. So you have 1 unit of milk. How many units of meat does it interact with inside the pot? Not in the stew, but it's been absorbed in the actual metal of the pot. How many units of meat? I don't know how many units. The first view says it interacts with all the units, and therefore all of them become ChaNaN. And the second view says, well, hold on a second. If it interacts with all the units, then maybe you have 60 times meat unit in your meat to the 1 unit of milk, in which case everything's fine. Even if it didn't, let's say it only interacted with 59 units of meat. If I have in my stew 60 times 60, I've nullified that too. So even if you have 59 units of meat flavor that became ChaNaN inside the pot, I have 60 times 60 in the stew.
The fact that the pot interacted doesn't matter because the stew is not.
The stew, as long as it has 60 times 60 the milk, that's the max amount effect the milk can have. The max negative impact the milk can have is turn 69 minus 0.0 point unit of ChaNaN, and I have 60 times 60 anyway. So however much ChaNaN there is in that pot, in the actual physical pot, in the absorption of the pot, I've nullified it with my stew because I have 60 times 60. That's view number 2. Also an extremist view. Why is it an extremist view? Because he takes it for granted that the milk inside does spread, just not sure how much.
But not that much. Enough to
But enough to make ChaNaN in there, always, right? And it means you're treating the flavor that's absorbed in the pot and the stew as 2 separate things. First, it goes into the flavor, becomes ChaNaN, and then you have to nullify that flavor in the stew. And he nullifies that by doing 60 times 60. And that's the max ChaNaN that can be inside your pot itself, inside the walls of the pot. Clear? View number 2, Ma'aram. Also not in the Shulchan Aruch. The third view is a Smag. The Smag. He says like this. Depends where the little drop of milk fell. Depends where it fell. If it fell, we have a glass cup. Pass me a clear cup, the plastic one. Make it easier. Oh, yeah. Like this. Depends where the milk fell. So let's imagine this is our stew. Yeah, this is our stew. It's inside of our pot. So where did the milk fall? Says if it fell here, opposite to where the stew is, then either one of 2 things happen. Either it's not going anywhere and it stays right where it is and everything's fine, or it's getting absorbed all the way through that it already becomes one flavor with the rest of the stew, and therefore as long as I have 60 times the milk, I'm fine. Because it's opposite the stew. So either it doesn't go anywhere, but if it is expanding, then it's definitely going to be drawn by the stew. In which case, all I need is 60 times, the stew should have 60 times the drop of milk. If it falls outside, on the outside of the pot, where the stew is. If it's up here, now how far does it spread? Inside the pot. How far does the milk spread inside the pot? I don't know. Maybe there's ChaNaN. Right? So therefore, says the Shulchan Aruch, this is the Smag's view. Smag's view. So there's stuff like this. Don't pour it out while it's still hot. Because if you pour it out while it's still hot, you might have your meat pass through some ChaNaN flavor. So wait till it cools down and then take it. Because once it's cold, it's not absorbing anymore. No problem. So the pot will have to be kosherized because the pot is ChaNaN, but the stew is fine because the stew never passed through that ChaNaN while it was in heat.
But how are you supposed to know then where it's absorbed if your stew is halfway?
So you see where the milk falls.
Yeah, but if it touches the top part, right?
Yeah.
The part that doesn't have the stew.
Yeah.
We said we don't know where it absorbs still. How do we know that it didn't absorb down low?
Right.
Well, it's just the BDF like for the first case that it's kosher because it's mixed in already, but you don't want to mix it in on purpose.
Say again?
Like if it's over here, then
if it's over where if it falls opposite
it's a BDF, like it's already mixed in. So you
Yeah,
can
Like
nullify,
you have 60 by nullify, yes.
but you don't want to pour it out because.
Oh, yes, you don't want to cause a nullification, even if you did have 60
Yeah.
to the times. Yes, correct. So, okay, we're gonna get to that. That's also a good point, which is gonna come up as well. in the Shulchan Aruch, Yes, but so you're asking the question is you don't know where it goes. Yes. So if it's up here, you don't know where it goes, but it's not going so far that it's gonna give you 60. It's not gonna give you that many units of ChaNaN in this area to the point that it's not bottle and 60. But moreover, even if it doesn't make it down here, as soon as it makes it down here, you measure the entire stew, in which case you for sure have 60 against it. It's only the question of ChaNaN outside the stew. Because inside the stew, you're not going to have any ChaNaN according to this view. Because in this view, as soon as you're opposite the stew itself becomes part of the mixture that's in the pot itself. Once you're opposite the stew and the flavor in the pot are one unit. And therefore you measure all of that for your 60 against the drop of milk. It's only when it's the part that's outside that can become ChaNaN because it doesn't have 60 to the ratio. And you don't want your hot stew to be passing over a ChaNaN that's absorbed above the stew area. So wait till it cools down and take it out. Clear?
Right.
Okay.
But could you pour it out a different direction?
Good question as well. The Shulchan Aruch can discuss that. Chumrah, astringency that we don't do that. We still wait till it cools down because we're not sure if it spreads all the way around. Right? That's the whole thing. We don't know where it spreads. Yeah. All right. Now, in this last scenario, if the just poured it out. Sorry, if the drop milk fell outside the pot, opposite to where the stew is. Okay, it's tiny drop of milk, so it's 60 to the ratio of my entire stew. Nullified, it's good. What about the pot? Is the pot itself kosher?
It fell on the outside, but what it
It fell on the outside.
No,
So
because you said the pot becomes ChaNaN.
even if it fell opposite the stew, not above the stew,
The
it fell.
pot still becomes ChaNaN. The stew.
Why? Explain.
Because no, it doesn't. Because the stew makes the pot. The stew that current stew is giving the flavors of the pot.
Oh. So you just argued one view, which is the flavor that's in the pot itself and the flavor of the stew is all one thing, and therefore if it falls into the outside of the milk of the pot, opposite to where the stew is, the pot is perfectly fine because it's all one mixture that's nullified by 60. No ChaNaN. Yeah, view, that's opinion number one, which would be the opinion of the Taz.
We didn't know who that's.
I don't think you have to remember who, but this is the Taz's view. Even though the Taz says, nonetheless, you should kosherize it because it looks too close to being not kosher. But you're right, in principle, that the pot itself is fine. However, the Shach is of the view that the pot itself is still prohibited because even if the flavor that made it into your stew is mixed altogether in ChaNaN, and not ChaNaN, but there's still a separation because the outside has to be kosherized. And there's your ChaNaN. This is the view of the
Okay, I have a
Shach.
question. If
Right.
And these are
If
the
you're-
4 views.
So it's 4 views. View 1 that says no such thing as ChaNaN in absorption pot. View 2 which says there is absorption of ChaNaN. There is ChaNaN in absorption, and then there's three different ways of dealing with the fact that there is ChaNaN in the pot and the absorption. Ariel, I gotta close the door, please. You have to close the door, please. Okay. Close the door, please. Thank you. So view number 2 is that there is ChaNaN in Blia, there is ChaNaN in absorption. The question is how you treat that. Do I say the whole thing is ChaNaN and you can never get 60 times that? Smug. View 2 is, well, as long as you have 60 times 60, because the max ChaNaN that's going to happen inside your pot is up to 60. View 3 is, if it's opposite the stew, and the whole thing is one mixture, and as long as you have 60 in your stew, you're good. If it's above the stew, now I don't know, maybe I have ChaNaN on the top, maybe I have ChaNaN in the pot above the stew, and therefore don't pour it out until it's cooled down. However, as we're going to learn, because, so first of all, number 1 is, right, it's only if the pot has been used in the last 24 hours for meat. If it's never been used for meat, then there's no ChaNaN anywhere. And if it's been used for meat more than 24 hours ago, then what happens? It's more than a day old, the flavor is negative, you don't have a problem anyway. So it's only if the pot's been used in the last 24 hours. It's a very beautiful thing to understand because this happens in kitchens.
Right.
There's a little splash of milk, and people think they have to throw their whole chicken soup out because a little bit of milk fell on the outside of their chicken soup. Not necessarily. If your chicken pot has, even if it fell above the chicken soup, if it has been used in 24 hours,
but at what
then maybe
point-
it's not such a big deal.
At what point does it have the flavor of the chicken soup that's inside it?
Oh, very good question. So the Shach mentions that and says that it's fine. Yeah, yeah.
Wouldn't just be like
He's all explanation
18
why.
minutes or something?
No. He explains the Shach explanation why. Okay. Then there's going to be a chumrah. So that's the din itself. The Shulchan Aruch is going to mention the chumrah, even though we just learned that when the milk falls above the stew is kosher once it cools down. He's going to bring a custom to be stringent and not have that stew at all, even after it cools down. He's going to bring the stringency, but because it's a stringency in case of great monetary loss, you can override that stringency. Moreover, there are those who understand, as we're going to see, because we mentioned at the beginning, there's a view which says there is no such thing as ChaNaN at all in absorption. You might, under certain circumstances, be leaning completely. For example, you have guests on Friday night. It's Erev Shabbos. You have no time to make a new pot. And if you wait till it cools down, you're giving your guest cold soup. So you might be able to rely on opinions which say that there's no ChaNaN anyway. And as long as you have in your soup 6 times the ratio of a little bit of splash milk, you're okay. So this is because it's a mitzvah, it's a monetary loss, it's a great need of guest. We can be lenient because again, we have that view from the beginning that says no such thing ChaNaN anyway in the absorption. That's going to come up as well in the Shulchan Aruch.
That's it. Hey.
That's going to be Sif Vav. That's actually Sif Hey Vav and Zion. Hey is the original din. Vav is going to be the chumrah. And Zion is going to be the case where you're a great monetary loss, you're stuck in a situation, it's Erev Shabbos. That's going to be Zion. Vav can have another din as well, which you'll see that if, let's say, if the pot is inside an oven, which you don't have these kind of ovens today, but if the pot is inside an oven, we have the pot here, the flame is on this side, and a drop of milk falls here, it burns up too fast. That doesn't even get absorbed at all. That's going to be mentioned as well. Different details like that are going to be mentioned throughout, but these are the principles upon which these details are built. Okay, I forget anything. Yeah, the end of Zion, the Ramah is going to mention a discussion on the question that we discussed.
The end of Zion?
Sorry?
End of Zion, you said?
Yeah, at the end of Zion, the Ramah is going to raise the question of a stream. You're going to bring it up in this case. We're not where the stream goes directly into the stew, but the stream is going directly onto the pot. Right? Is it a Kli Is it a Kli Sheni? Right? Because we learned already that if you're pouring out of Irui, or if you're pouring out, it's not the actual original heat, then it only prohibits Kedei Klipa, the amount of a peel, a surface layer. And if it's only prohibiting a surface layer, then it's only going to prohibit a surface layer of the pot. So your pot may have to be kosherized, but the stew inside is fine. Right? Details like that are going to be brought up in the Ramah. Mm-hmm. Another interesting detail that the Ramah is going to bring up is the link between the two sugyas. The first sugya, which we just learned, which is the question of whether or not you say ChaNaN or what the principles of ChaNaN are when you talk about flavor that's absorbed inside of a pot. That was the first discussion, and that would deal with that. Next discussion, which is in Ches Tes, is going to be the question of mainly Ches, the question of Zeya, which is steam.
Steam. Salt.
Sorry?
We brought this up. Salt.
No, remind. Wait, what?
Salt shaker.
We mentioned with the salt shaker. We also mentioned with when you talk about pouring wax, right? We also mentioned it. We mentioned it once. We mentioned it when? We mentioned it when we talked about stream, whether the stream is going up or stream going down. If the hot is on the bottom and it heats up the stream that's coming in. We mentioned it also once, I think. Okay, so here, in most cases, the question of steam becomes astringency, as we're going to learn, right? But before we get to that, at the end of Zion, there's a steam that becomes a leniency. How's that? So you have your stew, which fills up half your pot, but the pot is covered. Now, this is a common case where the drop of milk falls not on the side of the pot, but onto your cover of your pot. So what's that considered? Is that considered falling in the place where the stew is, or is it considered falling in the space where the stew is not? What do you think?
Covers like Move it, right?
You could remove it, but it's
Separate
on.
piece.
You could remove it. It's a cover, but now it's not removed. Now it's on top. It's covered. So what do you think? This, right? So let's paint it again. You have your chicken soup, or whatever your meat stew. Make it deraisa, your meat stew, and it's halfway full. It's covered with a pot, and a drop of milk falls on the top of the pot, not on the side. Do I treat it like it fell opposite the stew, in which case I only need 60 against the drop of milk? Or do I treat it like it fell on the side, in which case I have to wait till it cools down, and I only have leniencies in great need and whatever? Or I have to follow the custom of the minhag not to even use it, even if it wasn't, even if this cooled down, the custom that the Shulchan Aruch mentions. Yeah.
If it fell on the top.
On the top of the cover. Says the Rama, if the pot has gotten to the point where it's already steaming upward and that steam is dripping back down, as is the case for any good boiling soup, right? It drips in and drips out. Then it says if it fell into the spot where the stew is, because the flavor goes up, goes down, draws it all into one. And there's a principle, which we once mentioned, which is going to come up as well, again, which is if something is going to be absorbed in something else, inevitably, we treat that whole thing as one big mixture. So because the milk that falls into the top of the pot and the lid, thanks to our steam that's going up and down, the condensation inside a pot is going to, that flavor is going to inevitably mix into the whole stew. We treat it as if it's already mixed and I only need 60 against the whole thing in the stew itself. So here's where steam works to your advantage rather than to your disadvantage.
But that's
Cool. Yeah.
That could totally work for the side of the pot too, because the steam is touching the side of the pot where it's
Not the same degree. Watch next time you take a boiling hot soup, pull off the cover. You'll see for the first 2
But
seconds.
it's still
You'll see all of this is wet.
in with something hot on the side.
Yeah.
The hotter rising, so I guess
Yeah, that's right. You mamish see like a cloud that's trapped
And
inside
it's
your pot.
touching the side
And
of
it's
the
certain you take it
pot.
off. It's all water here. It's all mamish water.
Yeah.
The sides don't have that kind of liquid, but the cover mamish has liquid like a cloud. Huh?
That works well when it's already hot. If it was like getting hot and then the
Ah.
problem, then it'll be the whole thing.
Correct. It has to be when it's hot. Only once it's already produced that kind of level of steam. Yes, correct. There are those who disagree with the whole principle and say it's not true, and you treat it as if it's on the outside. It's not the mixture is not fast enough. But the Rama still maintains to be lenient that it's considered one big mixture thanks to our steam that's traveling up and down. Okay. Clear? Any questions so far? This is going to be the beef of the big discussion. Getting clarity on this is going to help us understand Sif Hey Vav Zayin. Otherwise, it's like you're lost. What's going on up here? Understanding these principles. Yeah, clear? Okay. The rest is rather simple and straightforward. Ches is pretty straightforward, which is the principle that, based on the Rosh, based on the Gemara, that steam is treated with the same stringency as the thing from which it's steamed out of, so long as the steam is still piping hot.
Is that like, yeah,
It's still
that's
on display.
simple, yeah.
Yeah, which is why I think I remember we spoke about this once, that if you want to fill up your cholent pot with hot water, you want to make sure that the spigot from which your hot water is dispensed doesn't become fleshik thanks to your cholent, right? So you may add water to your cholent, so long as the water you're adding is meeting the heat of your cholent pot. So there's no actual cooking going on because boiling hot water conditioned directly into conditioner. So what you do is you take your pot out. It's a two-man job. Let's imagine I had 3 hands. You take your pot out, yeah, and you open the spigot of your hot water urn and make sure the hot water goes directly into your pot. No cooking happening. It doesn't even look like cooking because you're not doing it while it's on the flame, or the stringency that certainly the Ashkenazim do. Sorry.
Shabbos.
Yeah, and then you close the spigot and you put it back onto your stove because you never let go. You didn't put it down. All those, you have your blech in your crock pot, your little separation. Okay, we're not learning the Shabbos, but you did all that. The one thing you're concerned about here is now that when you open up your pot, the steam rises, goes into your spigot, and makes it fleshik. And now you can't have your coffee with your hot water tomorrow morning from that spigot because it's fleshik. So the way to deal with that is you just open it. Rabbi Farkash writes this in his Sefer. I think I mentioned this last time. You open up it's only 3 people. Open up the cover, let that burst of steam go out, and then half a foot above the cholent, the steam is not that hot anymore, and you can pour your hot water directly in because your steam is not hot enough anymore to produce that kind of reaction. It's only when it produces that reaction does it cause an issue.
If it happened,
Sorry,
if it happened, the guy's careless. And
we learned in the Ramah that even not in Kofei in the Ramah that b'diavad it's still okay, right?
steam.
But l'chatchila you shouldn't. L'chatchila you shouldn't use that for milk.
Yeah.
Even though b'diavad maybe if you did, it wouldn't necessarily make your milk treif, right? Isn't that what we learned in Kofei? That's what we learned at the end of Kofei. Yes, with the candle with the chaylev, right?
But it might be Bas Bachal, maybe you can.
But B'chol more lenient, a bit more strict.
Might get more.
That's gonna come up over here in this sif.
Is
Sif-
chaylev
in Sif
considered
Ches, yeah.
basar?
Sorry,
Is chaylev considered basar? Is
no, chaylev is non-kosher fat.
yeah, is it considered basar?
That's a kasha if non-kosher meat has the din of basar b'chalav.
No,
It's
not
not kosher.
non-kosher. Okay, just
That's what it says, right?
just fat that is non-kosher, I guess.
It's the same principle. Yeah, that's whole machlekes. Yeah. Yeah, if it's not if the steam is not the axillus boy, it's fine. Akal shardi. Yeah, he said to begin with, you can hang meat to dry out, as we're going to learn, under pots of milk, so long as there's enough space that the steam is cold, or you put a board that stops the steam from going up, and you're fine. Yeah, this is very important because it's going to happen in your kitchen where someone cooks the wrong thing in the wrong oven. Now, the steam is really the bigger problem. Now, you're going to be saved a lot of time because, thank goodness, that pot was closed. If the pot was closed, as long as the outside of the pot was clean, and that oven was clean, so there's no reason for any real interaction between the two flavors. But once that thing was open, now you're running into an issue.
If you cook it at the exact same time,
Sorry?
you cook it at the exact same time.
We don't for astringencies, but that's the principle of double wrap.
It depends also if it's open oven or closed.
Correct. That's the principle of double wrap comes from. You first of all trap your own steam inside by the first wrap, and then the second wrap traps or keeps out any steam from the rest of the oven from going in. So even if that outside wrap absorbs steam, it's not going to transfer to your inside wrap, which is covering your pot. So in other words, two pots that are covered do not interact with each other, even if they're cooking in the oven at the same time. Unless, as we're going to learn later, there's liquid between them. Because one kli will not transfer. So there's another kli without food in between. Right? Another thing that's going to come up, do this at your discretion. But if you're going to like an Airbnb or something like that, and you bring along your blech, you can cook directly on that stove. It's easier to kosherize, but you can in theory do that.
The kosherize, you just heat it to the max.
But let's say you want to be machmer because it's glass, or I don't know what.
Oh, there's glass.
But if you put a piece of metal there, definitely no problem. Because let's say that even if the thing is dirty, it's trapping any steam under it, and your pot is clean on the bottom also. What's the issue? Right? So trim gets that. So although steam will transfer one to the other, but it has to have a capacity to transfer. If it doesn't have that capacity because it's trapped, it's going to be fine, as you're going to learn in the Rambam. That is the din of steam. There's also less steam questions in your kitchen. People are going to put the pan with the shakshuka into the oven to heat it up, and it'll happen. But it's still good to know that these principles.
Eating milk and meat, we already talked about, right?
Eating?
Let's say you make sourdough, you put it in a pot, so it's very thick, so it can't absorb.
Any pot doesn't have to be thick.
Oh,
But
doesn't make a
we're
difference
talking
in
about
thickness.
sourdough is cooked inside pots, but not the whole time. Sometimes it's open as well.
No, so let's say it's made in a closed pot the whole time.
The whole time.
And you put meat in the oven at the same time, but if it's an open oven, then
Okay, if also depends if your meat was uncovered or not, because now
if
you're
it's uncovered, let's say.
so if your meat's uncovered right now, the outside of your pot is absorbing.
Yeah.
And now you're stuck to the previous din of the ChaNaN
But
inside
it's
the
so
pot
thick
itself.
that it's not going inside.
Okay. Some of the Shulchan Aruch, some of the commentators inside are going to discuss if there are different rules for different types of kalim,
Yeah.
metal versus other ones. But if it becomes ChaNaN, if your view becomes ChaNaN, it's making it how thick it is. The whole thing is ChaNaN.
And if it's an open versus closed,
If what's open,
the oven, there's a hole in the oven.
put this thing out,
Yeah, there's no door. Every oven nowadays has a hole. It's considered open.
and
We'll
therefore
learn
what?
this later on, I think. There's 3 different types of oven, no?
Okay, well, that's like that. Just here the principle is that they're both closed. It's fine.
The oven is the idea of binyoma too. It's 24 hours for the oven, and it's also like it's.
For Zaya,
Yeah, for steam, does it have, like a microwave, you have like the 20.
Yeah. You're talking about like the dieved, if someone cooked something
Yeah,
by
someone
accident
cooked something,
and it
yeah.
wasn't perfectly clean, but it's
Yeah.
not, yeah, it doesn't have that.
24 hours, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
A microwave also 24 hours there.
Yeah, microwave is easier because it clean, oven doesn't clean.
Okay,
so-
there's Moshe's business with the microwave. There's cool about how to kosherize on microwaves. So Moshe's did.
Not everyone does it.
Most people do actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Most people
Microwave,
do.
because the oven is, it could, like something could get, like a microwave, you'll see if there's anything there.
Dishwasher, the same thing.
I mean, I don't know the lucky to see, but a microwave.
The nice thing with ovens are most ovens, you can also burn everything out, either by self-clean or you put it up to, let's say the oven gets to 550, right? So you put your oven to 550 for an hour and a half, it gets to 7 something. Everything's burnt out,
Yeah,
right? You put,
that's true, you can do it.
so kosherizing ovens are the easiest. You leave it for 24 hours, you clean it well, you leave it for 24 hours. So mama should spend, it's ben yoimai and it's down gamma, you spray it easy off. Plus you burn it out on self-clean, it's what everybody does Pesach, right? That's pretty much what people do, unless you have Pesach kitchen, that's what people are doing. Okay. And finally, Siftes is going to be a question about fat and candle and wax that drips. It's kosher and non-kosher. When you have to, if it's liquidy, you have to kosherize it. And if it's not liquid, you scrape it off because it doesn't absorb inside. And that is pretty much a rundown of the Sifim. Any questions, comments, thoughts? Yeah, sure, you can share thoughts.
We don't know each other long
If a drop of milk falls
Yeah.
into a pot and you nullify the drop of milk, do you have to kosher the pot?
No, you're talking about not in this case, what's in the outside of the pot.
Yeah.
Directly into the stew. And it's nullified? No. No, it doesn't, because it's nullified. The pot didn't absorb anything not kosher.
Mhm.
That's the plus and the minus. See, it's a funny thing that a drop of milk, directly in the stew is more lenient than the drop of milk on the outside of the pot. Because when it's in the stew, it feels worse, but it's nullified right away. Especially if it's closed or it's mixed. But the outside, you run into this issue we're discussing today that it's not nullified right away. Maybe you have a ChaNaN before it reaches your stew. So it ends up being more stringent, ironically.
Mhm.
Right? Imagine it like a piece of meat that's popping out of the stew.
Same concept.
Similar concept. You have some views that say, well, let's treat it like the outside, it becomes ChaNaN before it's mixed in. And others say, no, it's all mixed in. That's a good way to think about it. Right? So if
Over
it's
there, you have the opportunity to mix it right away.
correct, which makes this even more strict.
That's because here you don't have the opportunity.
Correct.
But what if you kind of mix it and bring the liquid up to the top of the pot, like mix it like an animal?
Does that help?
Well, I'm just comparing it to comparing it to the case.
If you're taking the view that there's ChaNaN in the vessel itself, then it doesn't matter what you do if you stir the stew or not. The milk traveling through that pot is becoming ChaNaN as before it makes to your stew.
When you mix it, you bring the
Doesn't matter. You have ChaNAN, and now you need 60 times 60 according to that other view, right? Because you have 60 ChaNaN inside, 60 units of ChaNaN inside the pot itself, right? It makes it much more difficult. Ironically, yeah. On the other hand, because you have the view which says there is no ChaNaN ever when it comes to pots, in case of need, we go all the way to lenient. Right? That's going to be in Sif Zayin. No, sorry, it's going to be in Sif, Sif Zayin, yeah. Vav is going to be strict because we're taking the strictest view, that the custom is to be extremely strict, and Zion's going to be, well, because there's opinions said the whole thing doesn't begin, we could be lenient in cases of great need. And even our strict Ramah is going to say, no, this is indeed our custom. To be lenient in case of need. Yeah, okay. But not yet. Again, I think the Chazar al-Mais is going to be on Friday, God willing. Okay, good night, everybody.